We only love because he first loved us, right? We only have the ability and the capacity to love because he showed us what love was about. I believe there's like 4 Greek words for love in the Bible. Eros, love, or we get the word erotic. That's the love between a man and a woman, a husband and a wife. There's storge love, which is the love of a family. There's phileo love, Philadelphia, that's brotherly love. And then, of course, the love that Jesus showed us, agape love, which is love without strings. In fact, agape love says, I love you because. No because. Well, we're glad that you're with us today. And I have a message for you today that I enjoy. I hope that you'll enjoy it. It's about my favorite creature, bald eagles. I love eagles. Loved eagles for a long time. I was born into a country where the bald eagle is its national symbol, the eagle. I grew up in a school district whose name was and still is Bald Eagle Area. We were the Bald Eagle Area. The Eagles. What we were. My first year at college, I went local to Lock Haven State College. It's now Lock Haven University. Guess what their mascot is? An eagle. But it wasn't until I was an adult that I actually got to see a bald eagle with my own eyes. And it was in a zoo. It was in the Philadelphia Zoo. And what a magnificent sight, even seeing them in a cage. But for 7 years in my ministry at Bucksmore Christian Church, we'd take a group of men down the Delaware River. And we called it our Camping, Canoeing, and Christ trip. And any men here interested in doing that? Okay. Maybe this fall we'll do that. But we'd always start at Port Jervis and then go down to the Water Gap. Well, in about 1997, I think it was, we were traveling down the river, and that was day 2 of the 3-day journey, 50-some miles on the river we take. And somebody looked up into the mountainside there and saw a white spot. And sure enough, there was an eagle. Magnificent things I've ever seen. Now, in years following, we saw more eagles, and eagles are making a comeback. And there's are there eagles around here? Yeah. You're a fish hatchery? Over in Central Pennsylvania, they made an Esper a fish hatchery. Easy.
Big fish hatchery over that way.
And there's probably eagles around it.
Yeah.
And so they're definitely magnificent. And the prophet Isaiah said, even youth grow tired and weary, young men stumble and fall, but those who hope or trust in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. And so as I've looked at these beautiful birds, I've just known that there would be a great illustrative message from their life. And it's appropriate because the eagle is a sign for God, is a symbol for God. And the Bible compares God to an eagle in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 49, and chapter 32, verse 11. And so I've dug into some information about my favorite bird and found some things that we can use if we want to soar like eagles. For instance, eagles can teach us about family, particularly marriage. Bald eagles are monogamous. They mate for life. And the only time they'll pick up a new mate is if their companion dies. They may take on a new mate. Matthew 19, verses 3 through 9, Jesus is discussing divorce. In the context of divorce, he tells us about marriage. Now some Pharisees came to Jesus, testing him and asking, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason at all? And that was a common thought in that day. In our day, you burnt the toast one too many times on divorce. That kind of stuff. It was ridiculous. And Jesus said, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female and said, for this reason, A man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. And they said to him, why then did Moses command to give her a certificate of divorce and send her away? And he said to them, because of your hardness of heart, Moses permitted you to divorce your wife. But from the beginning, it has not been this way. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for immorality and marries another woman commits adultery. And so we see here God's intent for marriage. It is to be a lifelong relationship. And part of the reason is because it is a covenant. It's a covenant relationship. It's not a commitment. It's not just a trial. It's a covenant. And covenants are never taken lightly. In fact, oftentimes in the Old Testament, covenants were established by shedding blood, by a sacrifice. And I think I've told you this before, I'll tell you it again, that they would sit there and watch that carcass and make that promise, say, may I be like that dead carcass if I break this promise. And so they'd have a meal together. There was cutting a meal. And so you look at our present day marriage ceremonies, and that's where the covenant is established. And there's an oath of fidelity. We call them vows today, correct? And there's a meal, usually. The meal is the most expensive part of the whole celebration. And is there a cutting? There's a big cake, right? And you cut. And so it's a covenant, not to be broken until death separates us, or death parts us, is what we said in our vows. And so we ought to keep them. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 says, now concerning the first three verses, now concerning the things about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. It's good for a man to remain single, if he can, and a woman to remain single if they can. But because of immoralities, each man is to have his own wife, and each woman to have her own husband. And the husband must fulfill his duty to his wife, and likewise also his wife, the wife to her husband. And so the marital relationship isn't a thing of trade off and on, using emotional trading chips or what have you. No, I am Lisa's and Lisa is mine. And we need to understand that. But what about divorce? Well, it'll take a while to teach about divorce, but let me simply say, if you are married today, stay married to the person you're married to. All right? Is that good enough? Caring for the family. The eagles build nests high above sturdy trees, right? And they bring in all kinds of branches, twigs, even rocks, but they line it with soft things like mosses and feathers and things. Have a nice down bed for the babies to be born into. And so they build on that nest year after year. Initially, a nest could be about 2 feet in depth, about 5 feet wide. And they build on it year after year. Eventually, it can become 10 feet wide and weigh several tons. And if their nest is destroyed, they'll often rebuild nearby. They'll come back to the same area. The care for the young is shared by both. Both of them nest watch, both of them hunt, both of them incubate the eggs, and both of them feed the young eaglets. And so, for us, in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, the Bible says, children, obey your parents in the Lord. Now that word obey is a military term, which means to step in line, follow the commands of the officer or in charge or the commander, whatever it is. And so if you have a Christian parent, you are of all people to be blessed. You're blessed. But obey them in the Lord, for that's right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise. What was the promise?
That it will go well with you.
It will go well with you, live a long life, right? And so, and then he gets into the fathers. Do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Two major keys in parenting: discipline and instruction. training and teaching. We need to be doing that with our children, the grandchildren that we have influence over. And so who's responsible for parenting? Both mates, mother and father. Each has something to offer. The eagles also teach us about growing. Now back to the nest. Remember I said it was lined with soft material for the eggs and then the young eagles, but underneath it are the broken branches, the sharp rocks, other items that just don't seem suitable for young eagles. Well, when the eagle when they reach flying age, they're quite reluctant to leave their cushy little home, the free meals that they have, the down bed and all that kind of stuff. And so that's when Mama Eagle starts to stir the nest. With those strong talons, she starts to pull up the carpet. And out comes the moss and the feathers, and up come those sharp rocks and those sharp sticks and things like that. And so that, along with other promptings, as the adolescent eagles get a little uncomfortable, they eventually take flight, more mature behavior. Hebrews chapter 6 verse 1 says, "Therefore, leaving the elementary teachings about Christ, let us press on to maturity." In chapter 5 verse 12, the Hebrew writer says, "For though by this time you ought to be teachers, you have need again for someone to teach you the elementary principles of the oracles of God, and you have come to need milk and not solid food." Someone has said, and I agree, that the church is educated far beyond their level of obedience. You know what to do. Sometimes you don't do it. But mature. Comes the time to grow up and mature in our faith, the Christian faith, instead of being like a baby and all you need to be concerned about us. You're concerned about God, and you're concerned about other people, and help them to be saved. And sometimes God has to take drastic measure in our life and stir up our nest, right? Hebrews chapter 12, verse 7, "It is for discipline that you endure. God deals with you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline?" And so if you're a child of God, you will be disciplined. If you walk the narrow road, God will discipline you to bring you back onto the right road that leads to him. He wants us to be like Christ. He wants us to be servants. And so he directs us that way. Eagles also teach us about the dangers of temptation and sin. A bald eagle was found on a riverbank, dead. Upon examination, no blood, no gunshot wound, but in its talons was a large fish. Now, eagles can carry about half their weight. You get beyond that, they have a tough time with it. And so apparently that eagle took too much for him, and it brought him down, and he never let go of it, and he drowned. Never, ever, ever underestimate the power of temptation and sin. It is very deceptive, and it's very controlling. Now, we've heard that Jesus is a man of prayer, and one of the reasons I think he prayed a lot was he knew the limitations of humanity, of the human side of him. And so he prayed. Jesus was tempted, and the stakes were very high. Now, the salvation of humanity does not hang in the balance with you, but your salvation does. And so what's your attitude toward temptation? No big deal. Or is it something that you need to stay away from, take seriously, stay away from it? Don't think that you can handle it on your own. Don't think that you can do it. I hear some people say, well, I'll clean up my life and then maybe I'll become a Christian. You never will. Because if you could change, you would have changed, and you haven't. You need help to change. Take a lesson from Joseph. Joseph was a good-looking man, young man, and somebody else's wife got the hots for him, and he didn't stick around to participate. He got out of there as quick as he could, leaving his coat behind, right? Got him in trouble, but he left. he fled, and that's what we need to do to face temptation. It's not a sin to be tempted. The sin is when you bite into the temptation and you sin. That's the problem. And then eagles teach us about overcoming difficulty. Two things they can teach us. First of all, eagles soar high in the sky, right? And if he would fold his wings, what would happen to him? Like a rock. And he only had a few seconds to spread his wings again and float up. And so, does he destroy the law of gravity? No. He overcomes the law of gravity. And Jesus, we know from his death, he destroyed the law of sin and death. So we don't have to live in that anymore. We can rise above it and live a holy life. In a storm, the eagle's the only bird that will not seek shelter. He'll fly into the storm to get higher elevation. He rises above. And so what do you do in troubled times? Do you worry? Do you fret? Jesus said in John chapter 16, verse 33, "These things I have spoken to you, so that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, you will have trouble, but take courage, I've overcome the world." Jesus is able to lift us over difficulty, much like the eagle rises above the storm. Why can people face a terminal illness with joy? Why can people lose a loved one and understand? Why can people get so hammered in life and still stand? I think the common factor in all is the strength that God provides them through Jesus Christ. God rises us above the circumstances. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. How are you handling life? More like a buzzard? Down low? Scavenging? Or like an eagle? Flying high, rising high. The psalmist said in Psalm 91, verses 3 and 4, "For it is he who delivered you, God, who delivered you from the snare of the trapper and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you may seek refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and a bulwark." Fly like an eagle. Do what God wants you to do. Live the life God wants you to live. And you have the comfort and the protection of his wings overshadowing you. Let's pray. God, we thank you for your creation. Thank you for the magnificent bird, the bald eagle. And thank you for the lessons that your creation teaches us. And we know that you want us to find those lessons. And God, it's amazing how you made those birds. And Father, we pray that the lessons we've received today about our family and about overcoming obstacles and staying away from sin and temptation will go with us this week and help us to be the people that you want us to be. God, help us to soar like eagles, find renewed strength even when our body doesn't cooperate, that we are still joyful and excited because our spiritual side, our soul is knit with you, and our spirit agrees with your spirit. And so, Father, we thank you and we love you and encourage us